In the 41st Millennium, the laws of reality bend beneath belief, and the stars themselves scream with madness. War has become theology, and survival a sacrament paid in blood. Yet even in this galaxy of eternal violence, nothing prepared the void for what tore through it. No ship screamed from the warp, no augur alarms sang warning hymns. Space itself folded inward, bruised purple and black, and something fell. If you crave stories of cosmic collisions and impossible tyrants, smash that subscribe button and bear witness, because what followed would scar history. The thing that emerged was not born of the warp, yet it carried a hatred vast enough to make daemons hesitate. Darth Vader fell into the 41st Millennium not as a savior, not as a god, but as a weapon searching for purpose, surrounded by a universe that would test whether control alone could survive forever after. He struck ground that had already forgotten peace. The world was a nameless ruin orbiting a dying red star, its surface clawed open by artillery and demonic manifestation alike. Iron tasted the air, mixed with promethium smoke and rotting incense. Cultists screamed prayers while Imperial Guard corpses burned in trenches that glowed faintly with warp frost. Vader rose from the crater slowly, systems recalibrating, armor scarred but intact. His breath thundered through his mask, steady, mechanical, dominant. He reached outward with the Force, expecting the familiar current of life and intention. Instead, he touched a screaming ocean of emotion. Hatred layered upon hatred, faith weaponized into psychic pressure. It pushed back. The sensation was not pain, but resistance, as if the universe itself questioned his right to command it. For the first time since Mustafar, uncertainty brushed his thoughts, then was crushed without mercy immediately by sheer will alone again. Around him, the battle stuttered into silence. Men and monsters alike felt something shift, a pressure colder than fear. A horned figure, swollen with warp muscle and sigils, turned toward Vader and laughed, a sound like tearing meat. It advanced, warp fire dripping from its claws. Vader did not hurry. His hand lifted, fingers curling with precise contempt. The demon froze mid-stride, limbs locking as invisible force crushed inward. Bone, horn, and unreality folded together. With a subtle twist, Vader reduced the creature into a shrieking knot before hurling it aside. It dissipated screaming into the immaterium. The cultists fell to their knees, not in worship, but terror. This was not a god. Gods demanded faith. This thing demanded obedience. The battlefield understood the distinction instantly, and silence spread faster than fire, faster than prayer, faster than hope ever could, here in this age of endless war and ruin alone. When Vader reached outward again, the warp answered. Not as the Force had, flowing and yielding to mastery, but as a storm of predatory awareness. Voices brushed his mind, promising dominion, recognition, release from pain. He ignored them. He had broken gods before, or men who believed themselves gods. This was no different. Still, the effort cost him. His cybernetics screamed warnings as power feedback rippled through systems never designed for psychic turbulence of this magnitude. He compensated instantly, narrowing his focus, enforcing discipline upon sensation itself. Rage remained, but caged, sharpened into a blade. The warp recoiled slightly, not defeated, but surprised. Something here did not bend as expected. Vader cataloged the anomaly without hesitation, already adapting, already planning, already assuming eventual supremacy through understanding, control, and relentless application of will alone, regardless of cost, consequence, or suffering inflicted upon this broken galaxy, now aware of him at last. Across the battlefield, warp-sensitive beings recoiled. Sorcerers felt their spells snarl. Daemons tasted something wrong, an iron presence that did not echo properly within the immaterium. One warband's champion approached cautiously, helm bowed, assuming protocol reserved for emergent princes. He offered blood, slaves, allegiance. Vader listened in silence, red blade igniting with a hiss that cut through chanting. The lightsaber's glow was thin compared to warp flame, yet sharper, absolute. With a single motion, Vader cut the champion in half, cauterizing flesh and soul alike. He did not want followers. Followers believed. Belief led to weakness. The survivors fled, screaming of a false prince who rejected worship and punished it. Their terror carried his presence outward, spreading through the warp like a scar forming, permanent, undeniable, and profoundly offensive to the gods that fed upon devotion, hope, and despair alike. Everywhere, always, now, and forever after this moment began. Imperial augur stations light years away registered anomalies too subtle to classify. Vox traffic from the system degraded into static and screams. An inquisitorial scryer marked the event as possible demonic incursion, priority crimson. On the ground, a surviving guardsman watched Vader from a trench, hands shaking around a lasgun he knew was useless. The black armored figure turned, mask reflecting firelight and horror. For a heartbeat, the guardsman felt seen, measured, dismissed. Vader did not kill him. He was irrelevant. The man would run. He would tell others. Fear would spread faster than truth. Vader understood information warfare intimately. Terror was the cleanest signal. Already the galaxy shifted imperceptibly. Bureaucratic gears turning, fleets rerouting, prayers whispered, and something ancient within humanity's empire awakening to a threat it could not categorize, negotiate, or fully comprehend yet. At this early stage, of course, inevitably, disastrously, soon enough for everyone involved here. Vader stood amid cooling ash, listening to distant artillery fade. This galaxy was louder than his own, saturated with agony and devotion twisted into weapons. It offended him. He would not kneel to its gods, nor allow himself to be claimed by its madness. Control was possible. It always was. Pain sharpened resolve. Loss forged strength. He had learned that lesson on Mustafar, and paid for it eternally. Now the lesson returned, written across stars instead of lava. Vader turned toward the horizon, cloak snapping in heated wind. Somewhere in this endless war, there were rulers, emperors, and tyrants who believed themselves supreme. He would find them, he would measure them, and if necessary, he would break them. The Force, fractured yet obedient, coiled around him, ready to be redefined under his will, regardless of cosmic law, superstition, or consequence. Beginning now, here, on this forgotten world, at war, forever. Above, the warp churned, carrying rumors of iron will and red light. Daemons whispered to their patrons. Astropaths dreamed of suffocation and marching shadows. Somewhere far away, a corpse god stirred upon a golden throne, unaware but not untouched. Vader did not know this yet. He simply began walking, each step deliberate, leaving scorched footprints in the soil. Behind him lay annihilation. Ahead waited a galaxy addicted to faith. It would learn another language: fear, order, silence, and Vader would be its teacher, whether it screamed prayers or not. Thus ended the first moment of contact, unnoticed by most, misinterpreted by those who glimpsed it, and destined to unravel assumptions older than empires, older than gods, older than hope itself, as the Dark Millennium absorbed a new constant, relentless and unyielding, named Darth Vader, fallen, furious, controlled, and utterly unafraid of what waited next. Among the stars, always, watching, listening. Hours later, Imperial response protocols began to bloom like iron flowers. Data slates compiled fragments, contradictions, heresies. Astartes chapters received encrypted alerts lacking clarity but heavy with threat implication. On distant craft worlds, Eldar seers paused mid-trance, hands trembling as futures realigned. Even the orcs on nearby worlds felt a stirring excitement they could not name. Vader remained unaware of these ripples, yet he had caused them by existing. Every act of will he imposed bruised the warp further, leaving impressions like scars. The galaxy noticed scars. It cataloged them, feared them, and eventually moved to cauterize them. Vader welcomed that inevitability. Conflict clarified hierarchy. Hierarchy created order. Order was the only mercy war ever allowed. Soon, fleets would burn, councils would argue, and destinies would collide around him, whether he sought them or not. This was merely the opening, the first breath, before a scream echoing forever onward, unchecked. For Vader, the path was simple: identify threats, eliminate obstacles, impose structure upon chaos until resistance collapsed. The galaxy's scale did not intimidate him. Empires were simply larger systems to dominate. As night fell, unnatural and starless, he constructed a temporary refuge among shattered armor and dead gods. Meditation followed, painful, focused, reshaping his connection to this hostile psychic sea. He would master it. He always mastered what hurt him. Above all, he rejected the notion that this universe could change him. He would change it instead. With that certainty anchoring his mind, Vader prepared to move again, unaware that every power in the 41st Millennium had begun, slowly and inexorably, to move toward him. The collision was inevitable, the consequences uncountable, and the darkness waiting ahead already trembling in anticipation of what followed. Next, always, forever, from this moment onward, unbroken, relentless, and absolute, enduring, merciless, ordered, controlled, Darth. The warp did not sleep. It never had. Yet, as Darth Vader began to move across the broken continent, it reacted with something close to offense. Invisible tides surged against his presence, psychic pressure folding reality in subtle, malignant ways. The air vibrated with whispers that were not sound, thoughts that were not his. Vader paused atop a ridge of fused glass and wreckage, red blade extinguished, cape hanging motionless despite the wind. He reached outward again, testing the immaterium deliberately this time. What answered was not the familiar harmony of the Force, but a cacophony of competing hungers, raw emotion weaponized into predatory awareness. Rage empowered it, faith shaped it, fear fed it endlessly. The warp screamed back at him, not in pain, but in recognition. Something here understood power, but not discipline. That distinction repulsed him. He adjusted. Control was not brute force alone. It was precision. Vader narrowed his psychic footprint, compressing intent into something harder, colder. Instead of commanding the warp, he imposed silence within himself, letting only need remain. The pressure lessened slightly. He felt the resistance recoil, uncertain. This universe expected psychers to burn bright and break quickly, consumed by the tides they touched. Vader did neither. His will was an iron fortress reinforced by loss, suffering, and relentless self-domination. The warp pushed again, probing for weakness. It found pain, endless and familiar, and attempted to amplify it. Vader welcomed the sensation, fed on it, and turned it inward. The immaterium flinched. For the first time since arriving, he allowed himself a flicker of satisfaction. This realm was dangerous, but it was not sovereign, not yet. He resumed walking, each step measured, senses expanding despite interference. He detected distant life signs, scavengers, feral humans warped by generations of exposure, and worse things lurking beneath reality's skin. The sky above twisted slowly, clouds forming shapes that dissolved when stared at directly. Lightning crawled sideways, purple and sickly, illuminating spires of bone that jutted from the earth. Vader ignored the spectacle. He had walked through hell before, lava choking the air, betrayal burning hotter than any star. This was merely another battlefield with different rules. As he advanced, warp entities tested him, manifesting briefly as claws of shadow or voices mimicking regret. He dismissed them with contemptuous flicks of the Force, crushing or dispersing them without slowing. Each act left ripples, impressions stamped into the immaterium like pressure dents in soft metal. The warp remembered. That memory would matter later. Miles away, a coven of chaos sorcerers reeled as their rituals collapsed. Sigils bled wrong, daemons refused summons. One acolyte screamed as his mind brushed against Vader's presence and recoiled, nerves frying under psychic pressure that felt like suffocation beneath armor. The sorcerers argued, accusing each other of blasphemy, until one spoke the truth aloud. Something else was imposing order. That word tasted foul in their mouths. Order belonged to gods, to tyrants, to things that crushed possibility. Panic spread through their enclave, and desperate offerings were made. Blood spilled. The warp surged, angry now, no longer curious. Vader felt the shift instantly, like a storm front advancing. He stopped again, planting his feet, cloak snapping as unseen winds howled around him. The immaterium gathered itself, preparing to strike not through subtlety, but force. Reality tore open ahead of him. A rent in space vomited demonic forms, grotesque and varied, screaming praises to distant patrons. Warp fire scorched the ground as creatures clawed their way into existence. Vader ignited his saber, crimson light cutting through the murk. He did not rush forward. He waited. Timing was everything. As the first daemon lunged, he stepped aside and severed its arm, then its head. Movements economical, precise. Another leapt from above. He caught it midair, crushed its skull, and hurled the dissolving mass back into the breach. The force flowed through him unevenly, turbulent but responsive, like a wild beast slowly accepting a rider. Each kill required more focus than it should have, warp resistance dragging at his intent. He adapted, compensating with physicality, letting cybernetics and muscle share the burden. The battle became a lesson, one he learned rapidly, violently, and completely. The breach widened, reacting to destruction with fury. Larger entities emerged, armored in nightmare flesh. Weapons formed from belief and hatred. Vader met them head-on. He tore weapons from claws, impaled bodies on invisible spikes of telekinetic force, and advanced relentlessly into the storm. Pain flared as warp energy lashed his systems. Feedback, screaming warnings. He ignored them. Pain was a constant companion, useful, familiar. The warp tried again, whispering promises of release, of power without restraint, of transformation. Vader laughed, a harsh mechanical rasp. He already possessed power. He had already paid the price. There was nothing this realm could offer him except resistance, and resistance only refined control further. With a final surge of will, he collapsed the breach inward, compressing unreality until it imploded, sucking screaming daemons back into the immaterium. Silence followed, heavy and unnatural. The warp withdrew, wounded but not defeated. Vader stood amid steaming craters, chest rising and falling steadily. He assessed himself. Power expenditure was higher than optimal. The Force responded, but imperfectly, like a damaged circuit requiring rerouting. He would need to recalibrate, learn the warp's currents without surrendering to them. This universe punished impatience. That was acceptable. Patience was another form of control. He knelt, resting one gauntlet against the ground, and entered a meditative state. Around him, reality trembled slightly, as if uncertain whether it was allowed to exist unchallenged. Vader imposed stillness upon his thoughts, drawing the Force inward, aligning it against the immaterium's pressure. Slowly, resistance lessened. Not because the warp yielded, but because he learned how to press back without inviting retaliation. It was a duel of philosophies as much as power, and Vader intended to win both. Elsewhere, astropaths screamed as nightmares flooded their minds. Reports of demonic instability multiplied, conflicting, impossible to verify. Inquisitorial adepts flagged the system again, elevating threat level. Astartes chapters began preparations, rituals of readiness performed without knowing why. On a distant craft world, an Eldar Farseer tore himself from a vision, gasping. He had seen a black armored figure walking through futures like broken glass, leaving narrowed paths behind him. This was not a daemon prince. This was something worse. The Farseer ordered observation, not intervention, knowing some forces were better understood before challenged. Even the warp, vast and arrogant, had learned that lesson now. It licked its wounds, whispering to gods who listened with growing interest. Something had arrived that did not seek worship. That alone made it dangerous. Vader rose from meditation renewed, though not restored fully. He accepted the limitation calmly. Mastery required context. He would gain it. The horizon burned faintly with distant war, artillery flashes and orbital strikes painting the clouds. Civilization, such as it was here, lay in that direction. Information waited there. Hierarchies waited there. He began moving again, cloak trailing through ash. As he walked, warp phenomena skirted his path, avoiding direct contact. Lesser entities fled outright. The Immaterium had learned something essential. Direct confrontation was costly. It would adapt. So would he. This was the beginning of a longer struggle, one not resolved by a single battle or declaration. Vader welcomed it. Endless war was familiar territory. He had been forged within it. Now, the galaxy would discover that the warp itself could be challenged by will alone, sharpened by suffering. armored in iron discipline. Above, unseen, the warp churned, plotting. It would not forget this insult. It would escalate. Gods would take notice. Mortals would misinterpret signs. Vader sensed none of that explicitly, yet intuition guided him forward, deeper into conflict. He did not fear corruption. Corruption required desire. He desired only order. That desire anchored him more firmly than faith ever could. As night deepened and unnatural stars flickered into existence, he walked on, a solitary axis of control, cutting through madness. The warp screamed back, but quieter now, cautious, resentful. It had found something that did not break when pressed. That realization would echo across the immaterium, reshaping how it responded to him and perhaps to others, forever. For now, Darth Vader advanced, learning the rules of this hostile universe by breaking them carefully, deliberately, one confrontation at a time, until mastery followed inevitably. The first to approach Darth Vader did not come in rage nor fear, but ceremony. Long before he reached the shattered Manufactorum city on the horizon, the warp announced him. Symbols burned in the air, invisible to mortal eyes, yet blazing within the immaterium. Whispers spread through cult cells and warbands like fire through dry parchment. A new presence had arrived, not born of the warp, yet walking through it without drowning. To the servants of chaos, such a thing could only mean one truth. An unclaimed prince had manifested, and power without allegiance was an offense that demanded correction, reverence, or subjugation. Thus, the warband came prepared. Banners raised, chants rehearsed, blood already spilled in anticipation of favor earned. They met him at the edge of the ruins. Twisted Astartes in corrupted plate formed a semicircle, armor engraved with scripture written in flayed flesh and brass. Cultists knelt in rows before them, foreheads pressed into ash, voices lifted in ecstatic terror. Warp light pulsed around the gathering like a heartbeat. At their center stood the warband's master, once an imperial captain, now swollen with gifts from the gods. His voice boomed across the broken ground, proclaiming revelation. He named Vader a herald, a chosen blade, a lord ascending. He spoke of destiny, of apotheosis, of the warp recognizing its own. Vader listened in silence, mask unreadable, presence heavy enough to make even corrupted warriors shift uneasily. He felt the expectation pressing in, the psychic weight of belief attempting to define him. It disgusted him. Belief was weakness. Belief ceded control to something unseen. Vader had destroyed belief within himself long ago, burned it away until only certainty remained. The warband leader approached slowly, removing his helm, exposing a face warped by devotion and mutation. He knelt, lowering his head. The cultists followed, prostrating themselves in unison. "Command us," the champion said. "Claim what is owed." The warp surged eagerly, flooding the space with approval. Vader felt it attempt to wrap around him, to crown him through consensus and surrender. He stepped forward instead. The ground cracked under his weight. "You kneel," he said, voice amplified and cold, "because you fear what you do not understand." The champion looked up, confused, reverent smile faltering. Vader raised his hand. The force answered, uneven, but lethal. The champion's body lifted from the ground, limbs flailing. His armor began to collapse inward, ceramite folding like paper, bone shattering beneath it. Vader tightened his grip slowly, deliberately, forcing the surrounding cultists to listen to every scream. "I do not require worship," Vader continued. "I do not accept gods." With a final motion, he crushed the champion into a compact mass of ruin and dropped it at his feet. The warp howled in outrage. The cultists screamed in terror. The Chaos Space Marines raised their weapons too late. Vader ignited his saber, red light reflecting in dozens of helm lenses. The ceremony ended in slaughter. He moved through them like inevitability. Bolter fire detonated against his telekinetic shields, each impact requiring focus, draining but manageable. He advanced regardless, saber carving through corrupted armor, severing limbs, cauterizing wounds. When ammunition ran dry, he ripped weapons from hands and turned them back upon their owners. Warp blessings flared as sorcerers attempted to bind him, hexes lashing against his mind. He pushed back with brute will, crushing their concentration, snapping necks with casual precision. Cultists broke and ran. Vader led them. Terror was more useful alive. Within minutes, the ground was littered with corpses and dissolving warp matter. The warp recoiled violently, its attempt at coronation reduced to mockery and blood. Something fundamental had gone wrong. As the last Chaos Marine fell, Vader extinguished his saber and surveyed the carnage. He felt the Immaterium churn angrily. Gods offended by rejection. Worship was currency to them. He had spat on it. That act carried consequences. He welcomed them. A universe that demanded submission would learn another model. Vader reached out again, sensing distant presences, reacting to this disruption. Warp routes distorted. Astropathic messages corrupted. The false prince rumor spread faster now, twisted by survivors into warnings. A being who killed God's servants and refused blessing walked the stars. To chaos, that was intolerable. To the Imperium, it would be indistinguishable from heresy incarnate. Vader did not care. He had asserted a principle, and principles shaped empires more effectively than fleets. Deep within the warp, attention sharpened. The ruinous powers felt the rejection like a wound. Pride demanded response. Curiosity tempered it. This being was not immune, merely resistant. Resistance could be broken. Already, subtle pressures began aligning. Future paths bent, drawing conflict toward Vader like gravity. He sensed the shift faintly, an undercurrent of inevitability threading events together. He did not resist it. Conflict revealed structure. Structure could be dominated. As he turned toward the city again, he felt his connection to the Force stabilize marginally, adaptation taking hold. Each confrontation refined his understanding of this psychic ecosystem. The warp was vast, but it was not unified. That fragmentation could be exploited. Within the ruins ahead, Imperial survivors hid among shattered hab blocks, unaware of the slaughter beyond their perimeter. Vox arrays crackled with corrupted signals. Somewhere, an inquisitorial probe ship adjusted course. Vader advanced without urgency. He was no longer merely surviving. He was establishing precedent. No gods, no worship. Only control enforced through superior will. That message, once delivered violently enough, would propagate. The galaxy would respond accordingly. He had broken cults before. This was no different, only larger in scale. As he crossed into the outskirts of the city, the warp's whispers followed him. No longer seductive, now venomous. He ignored them completely. Silence, once imposed, was easier to maintain. Far away, a Chaos Lord received fragmented reports and laughed, intrigued rather than angered. Challenges sharpened ambition. Elsewhere, a Daemon Prince screamed as its domain trembled. The Immaterium did not like uncertainty. Vader embodied it. He had rejected the role assigned to him by belief. That defiance alone made him dangerous beyond measure. In the city ruins, the first Imperial eyes would soon fall upon him, interpreting his presence through lenses of dogma and fear. Vader welcomed that too. Misunderstanding was inevitable. Correction followed. He stepped over a broken Aquila embedded in rubble, unaware of its symbolism, uninterested even if he had known. Symbols did not rule him. They existed to be used or discarded. As night deepened, unnatural stars brightened overhead, reflecting off his armor like distant fires. Vader paused briefly, considering the pattern forming around him. Chaos had offered a crown. He had crushed it. The galaxy would escalate. He would answer in kind. This was not ascension. This was conquest of meaning itself. The idea pleased him. With measured certainty, Darth Vader continued forward, leaving behind the shattered remains of false princes and shattered expectations alike, his refusal echoing through the warp as a declaration of war against belief, destiny, and gods themselves. The Immaterium would remember this moment as the first true insult, and it would never forgive it. Word of Darth Vader's refusal spread faster than fire through dry void. Chaos did not speak with one voice, but it listened collectively when defiance carried weight. The warp twisted around the ruins as he advanced deeper into the city, reality thinning in places like stretched skin, streets bent at wrong angles, shadows lagged behind their owners, whispers crawled along walls etched with blasphemous graffiti and imperial prayer alike. Vader felt it all, cataloged it, dismissed it. He had not come to be tested by superstition. He had come to impose certainty. The galaxy responded by pushing back harder, no longer curious, now hostile. The warp had decided that if he would not be crowned, he would be corrected. The first sign was silence. Not the absence of sound, but its removal. Wind stopped. Distant artillery faded. Even the ever-present psychic background noise dulled, as if the universe inhaled. Vader halted in the middle of a broad avenue choked with wrecked transports and skeletal remains fused into the pavement. His sensors registered nothing anomalous, yet instinct screamed warning. Then the silence shattered. Warp lightning struck the ground in a ring around him, carving sigils of summoning that burned with raw intent. From them rose figures of impossible symmetry and rot, daemons bearing marks of different gods, united by shared offense. This was not a test, this was a declaration. A towering figure spoke, voice layered with many mouths. It offered ultimatum instead of seduction: bend or be unmade, accept purpose or be erased. The warp surged behind the daemon, power condensed into authority. Vader listened, head slightly tilted, as if considering a tactical briefing. He felt the pressure intensify, psychic force hammering against his defenses, seeking cracks formed by pain and regret. The Immaterium attempted to drown him in amplified emotion, replaying memories of loss, betrayal, burning flesh. Vader absorbed it all without flinching. Those memories were not weapons, they were foundations. He stepped forward, boots crunching bone and glass, and spoke. "I have purpose," he said. "It does not include you." The demons attacked as one. Warp fire, claws, blades formed from belief itself converged. Vader exploded into motion. He raised a telekinetic barrier that flexed and screamed under the assault, each impact draining focus, forcing adaptation. He advanced anyway, saber igniting, cutting through unreality with surgical precision. Where the blade struck, demons unraveled, their forms destabilized by physics that did not care about faith. Vader adjusted his force usage, reinforcing physical strikes with bursts of compressed will, learning how to tear apart entities sustained by emotion rather than matter. It was inefficient, costly, but effective. The warp reeled as one daemon after another fell, their deaths feeding rage instead of reverence. The towering spokesman charged, weapon raised, its presence bending probability around it. Vader met it head on. The collision sent shockwaves through the street, cracking buildings already half collapsed. The daemon struck with strength magnified by worship across countless worlds. Vader countered with absolute focus, muscles, and servos, screaming as he pushed back. The force flickered, interference spiking, but he compensated instantly, anchoring himself in the physical. He headbutted the demon, cracked its skull, then plunged his saber through its core. The creature screamed, voice dissolving into static, before collapsing into warp mist. The summoning sigils guttered and died. Silence returned, heavy and resentful. Vader stood alone again, armor scorched, systems running hot. He felt the cost now, a drain like exhaustion layered atop pain. He acknowledged it without concern. Every expenditure bought understanding. The warp had attempted to define him as something it could categorize: prince, herald, champion. He had denied every role. That denial mattered. Belief shaped reality here, but refusal shaped it too, carving absences where expectations failed. Vader sensed the Immaterium recalibrating, withdrawing its crude force, replacing it with subtler pressures. Gods did not like being ignored. They preferred to corrupt what they could not destroy. He prepared accordingly. He moved again, slower now, conserving energy, recalibrating his connection. He experimented with restraint, using the force sparingly, letting physical dominance carry him when possible. His cybernetics adapted, rerouting power, compensating for warp feedback. This was not surrender. It was efficiency. As he advanced, warp manifestations lessened, replaced by watching presences just beyond perception. Vader ignored them deliberately. Attention fed them. Control starved them. The philosophy was simple, brutal, effective. By the time he reached the city's central plaza, the warp had fallen into uneasy quiet. That quiet would not last, but it was enough. Hidden within the ruins, Imperial survivors watched in horror as the black armored figure crossed open ground unchallenged by the madness they had learned to fear. Some whispered prayers, others fled. A few raised weapons with shaking hands. Vader did not engage. He was not here for them. Yet their terror washed over him, feeding the warp, creating ripples he felt immediately. The Immaterium twisted those emotions, trying to weaponize them against him. Vader clenched his fist, crushing the attempt mid-formation. Fear was his tool, not the warp's. That distinction mattered. Each time he asserted it, the Immaterium's response grew more cautious. Far beyond the city, Chaos commanders reevaluated. This was no false prince to be guided or exploited. This was a variable that destabilized doctrine. Some argued for annihilation through overwhelming force. Others advocated patience, corruption through exposure. The gods themselves debated, their attention divided by countless wars. Vader was a threat, but not yet an existential one. That judgment would change. For now, he walked unopposed, leaving behind shattered daemons and broken assumptions. He had declared a truth. Chaos could not abide. Power did not require worship. That idea alone was heresy on a cosmic scale. As night deepened, the sky bled colorless light, stars flickering in and out like failing circuitry. Vader paused at the plaza center, surrounded by toppled statues of saints and demons alike. He sensed something new now. Not warp pressure, but distant observation. Mortal minds, disciplined, suspicious, organized. The Imperium was watching. He felt their fear layered with duty, their faith hardened into resolve. That would be a different challenge. Faith wielded as law, not temptation. Vader considered it briefly, then dismissed speculation. One confrontation at a time. Chaos had made its claim. He had rejected it utterly. The galaxy would respond next. The warp withdrew fully as he stood there, wounded pride coiling into future vengeance. Its whispers faded to a background hiss, no longer daring direct address. Vader felt a measure of grim satisfaction. He had established boundaries. He had declared independence. No gods, no masters, only hierarchy enforced through will and fear. This universe would adapt or break. He turned toward the tallest remaining spire, already plotting next moves, unaware that his defiance had begun to alter strategic calculations across the stars. For Chaos, he was now an anomaly to be studied, corrupted, or erased. For the Imperium, he would soon be something worse than a demon. He would be an idea that refused to kneel. With that certainty anchoring him, Darth Vader resumed his march, leaving the plaza and its shattered icons behind. The Immaterium watched from a distance now, plotting instead of striking. Gods learned slowly, but they learned. And they had learned this. The being who walked among their wars did not fear damnation. He feared disorder. That made him dangerous beyond measure. The Imperium of Man did not react quickly. It reacted thoroughly. Data fragments from the ruined system crawled through administratum channels, stripped of context, distorted by fear and superstition. Reports contradicted each other. A daemon lord rejecting worship, a Xenos war engine walking unscathed through warp storms, a heretic construct wielding impossible weapons. Inquisition analysts argued classifications late into ship cycles, purging records even as they compiled them. One conclusion, however, emerged with brutal clarity. Whatever had appeared was not contained by Chaos. That alone elevated the threat beyond tolerance. Observation protocols escalated into covert surveillance, and eyes turned toward the black armored figure advancing through the ruins with methodical certainty, unaware that an empire had begun dissecting his existence line by line. In orbit, a cloaked inquisitorial vessel adjusted position, its presence masked by layered countermeasures and prayer engines humming with restrained psychic output. Servitors fed corrupted Vox traffic into logic engines, while sanctioned psychers strained to interpret warp echoes without screaming. The consensus formed reluctantly. This entity exerted control over the Immaterium without invoking demonic patronage. That made it heretical beyond precedent. The Inquisitor overseeing the operation, a gaunt woman carved by decades of purges, authorized silent observation. Engagement would come later. First, they would learn. Ignorance had killed worlds before. She would not repeat that mistake, even if her peers would have preferred immediate extermination. On the ground, Vader sensed something new, not warp pressure, but scrutiny. Distant minds brushed his awareness like needles testing armor. Disciplined, controlled, layered behind ritualized thought patterns. Soldiers, not cultists, not daemons. An organized hierarchy, bound by belief, hardened into law. Vader adjusted instantly, masking his presence, compressing his psychic footprint to a narrow band. The Force responded imperfectly, but obeyed. He allowed the Watchers to see only what he permitted, a solitary warlord moving through devastation, powerful but not reckless. Fear would grow more effectively if seeded slowly. He had learned that lesson long ago. Imperial Guard reconnaissance units moved cautiously through the outskirts, guided by Auspec's readings that made no sense. Heat signatures flared and vanished. Warp contamination registered, then collapsed. One squad spotted Vader crossing an open plaza and froze. Their sergeant whispered orders, voice shaking despite training. Blast guns rose. Vader stopped, turning deliberately. He regarded them in silence. The soldiers felt the weight of his attention like a physical force. Some fired. Red beams splashed harmlessly against an invisible barrier. Vader did not retaliate. He stepped forward once. The squad broke instantly, discipline collapsing into terror. They ran. Vader let them. Panic carried stories farther than corpses. Inquisitorial observers recorded everything, tagging behavioral patterns. He did not pursue fleeing enemies. He did not destroy infrastructure without cause. Violence was precise, purposeful. That worried them more than mindless slaughter ever could. The Inquisitor watched the feeds in silence, fingers steepled. This was not a daemon. Daemons raged. This thing calculated. She authorized deployment of a kill team for closer observation, not engagement. Failure would be costly, but ignorance cost more. The order rippled outward, activating elite operatives trained to survive impossible encounters long enough to report. Vader resumed his advance, entering the city's industrial sector. Rusted manufactoria loomed overhead, their machines long silent, their spirits broken or corrupted beyond recognition. He felt faint machine minds whispering, broken echoes of function and obedience. He ignored them. Machines obeyed design. Faith had no place there. As he moved, warp anomalies diminished further, retreating from his path. The Immaterium had learned restraint. That absence of pressure allowed his connection to the Force to stabilize marginally. He noted the improvement with detached satisfaction. Adaptation continued. Hidden among the ruins, the kill team took positions. Veteran operative clad in null weave and faith-inscribed armor, minds disciplined against psychic intrusion. They watched Vader through magnified optics, recording gait, posture, response time. One psyker strained to touch his presence and recoiled instantly, nose bleeding. The Inquisitor received the data and frowned. The entity radiated dominance, not corruption. That distinction shattered doctrinal categories. She authorized a controlled test. A servo skull drifted into Vader's path, projecting a minor psychic provocation designed to elicit response. Vader felt it immediately, a crude probe brushing his defenses. He crushed it without looking, servo mechanisms collapsing into scrap midair. The message was clear. He knew he was being watched. He did not care. Imperial command debates intensified. Some argued for immediate Astartes intervention. Others warned against escalation without understanding. The Inquisitor delayed them all. Patience was a weapon too. Vader's existence challenged foundational assumptions. That power flowed from the Emperor, or from chaos, nowhere else. An independent axis of control threatened the metaphysical monopoly, sustaining the Imperium. That could not be tolerated indefinitely. For now, it would be studied. As dust settled, Vader reached a high vantage point overlooking the city. Fires burned in the distance. Vox chatter echoed faintly. He sensed Imperial organization tightening around him, nets closing slowly. He welcomed it. Structured opposition was preferable to chaotic interference. He knelt briefly, entering meditation, reinforcing his psychic defenses while observing the Watchers indirectly. Their minds were rigid, layered with faith that acted as armor. Interesting. Faith as discipline, not indulgence. That would require different tactics. The warp watched too, simmering with resentment. It saw mortals circling the anomaly it could not claim. That insult festered. Gods whispered plans. The galaxy's great engines turned, drawn by gravity they did not understand. Vader rose from meditation and continued forward, leaving the vantage point behind. He had drawn attention from chaos and the Imperium alike. That was acceptable. Conflict clarified hierarchy. Hierarchy produced order. Order was inevitable. By the time Imperial Command finalized escalation protocols, Vader had already moved beyond initial containment zones. Reports lagged behind reality. That too was familiar. Bureaucracy always struggled to keep pace with decisive action. Vader exploited that gap instinctively. He was no longer merely surviving. He was shaping response curves, forcing adversaries to react on his terms. The Inquisitor realized this too late, watching projections shift unfavorably. She closed her eyes briefly, then issued the next order. Observation was no longer sufficient. The Imperium would test him properly soon. Vader sensed the change immediately. The scrutiny sharpened, intent hardened into resolve. He allowed himself a thin, private satisfaction. The galaxy had noticed him fully now. He had rejected chaos. He had unsettled the Imperium. Both would respond with violence. That was the language he understood best. As he disappeared deeper into the ruins, Darth Vader prepared for the next escalation, confident that fear, once introduced, would do most of the work for him, as it always had. The first Space Marines did not announce themselves. They never did. Orbital insertion pods screamed through the upper atmosphere like falling meteors, their heat signatures briefly flaring before Auspec's masking fields swallowed them whole. They struck the outskirts of the ruined city with seismic force, ceramite hulls cracking streets already fractured by war. From within, giants emerged, armored in cobalt blue marked with sigils of ancient lineage. Bolters were raised, firing lines established, kill zones calculated within seconds. The Adeptus Astartes had arrived, and with them came the Imperium's most refined expression of disciplined violence. Darth Vader felt their presence instantly. These were not ordinary soldiers. These were weapons shaped into men, and they moved with a precision he respected. He stood in the open, framed by the skeletal remains of a manufactorum tower, cloak hanging still. He did not hide. He wanted them to see him clearly. The Space Marines advanced methodically, overlapping fields of fire covering every approach. Their Vox channels crackled with clipped, efficient commands. Target designation confirmed. Threat classification unresolved but extreme. Vader sensed their minds, heavily shielded, faith layered over genetic conditioning and centuries of indoctrination. They were difficult to read, but not impossible. Their belief was rigid, absolute. That rigidity could be exploited. The first volley came without warning. Mass reactive bolts tore through the air, detonating against Vader's telekinetic barrier in concussive bursts. The shield held, but each impact demanded focus, draining him incrementally. He adjusted instantly, narrowing the barrier to intercept only lethal trajectories. Shrapnel scored his armor. He advanced regardless, step by deliberate step. The Marines adjusted fire patterns, targeting joints, exploiting angles. Vader felt the pressure spike. These warriors were competent. That pleased him. He raised his hand and ripped a chunk of ferrocrete from the ground, hurling it into their formation. 2 Marines were thrown aside, armor dented but intact. They recovered immediately, returning fire. Discipline held. Vader ignited his saber and closed the distance. Bolter rounds screamed past him as he deflected what he could, absorbed what he must. 1 Marine charged, chainsword roaring. Vader met him head-on, parrying the chainblade and driving his saber through the Marine's chestplate. The giant staggered, disbelief flickering before death claimed him. Vader twisted, using the corpse as partial cover as more rounds detonated against ceramite. He hurled the body aside and crushed another Marine's helmet with a focused telekinetic strike, snapping the warrior's neck instantly. The squad adapted, spreading out, maintaining spacing. They learned quickly. So did he. The Marines deployed grenades, crack charges detonating with armor-piercing fury. Vader was thrown back, systems screaming warnings. He rose immediately, anger flaring hot and sharp. The force surged unevenly, warp interference spiking as psychic pressure flared from the violence. He compensated, anchoring himself physically, tearing weapons from Marine hands, crushing one into the other with brutal efficiency. Still, the cost mounted. These warriors were not cultists or daemons. They were engineered to kill things like him, or as close as this universe could manage. That demanded respect. From orbit, the Inquisitor watched the feed in grim silence. Space Marines fell, but not easily. The entity bled efficiency with every exchange. That was promising. It could be worn down. She authorized escalation parameters, but held orbital fire. Data mattered more, than victory at this stage. The Marines pushed forward. Bolter fire relentless, tactics fluid. Vader felt fatigue creep in at the edges of perception. He crushed it mercilessly. Fatigue was a choice. He refused it. The squad leader advanced, power sword humming. He spoke a single phrase, invoking the Emperor's name as both oath and weapon. The words carried psychic weight. Faith hardened into a blade. Vader felt it press against him, not painful, but abrasive, like grinding stone. Interesting. Faith wielded as force, not supplication. He met the Marine's charge, blades clashing in a shower of sparks. Strength met strength. The Marine was powerful, disciplined, utterly convinced of his righteousness. Vader broke that conviction by ripping the power sword from his grasp mid-swing and impaling him with it. The remaining Marines hesitated for half a second. Vader used it. He unleashed a burst of telekinetic force that sent the survivors crashing into walls, armor cracking. Before they could recover, he moved through them with brutal precision, sabers severing limbs, crushing skulls, ending lives with merciless efficiency. The warp surged in response, feeding on the violence, but Vader forced it back, refusing amplification. The last Marine fell, Vox crackling with static and dying prayers. Silence returned, broken only by Vader's measured breathing. He stood amid the fallen, assessing damage. Armor integrity compromised but functional. Power reserves reduced. Connection to the Force strained but intact. He accepted the toll. This was the price of proving superiority. The Imperium reeled. Space Marines were not supposed to fall like this. Not to a single entity. The Inquisitor closed her eyes briefly, recalculating threat levels. This was beyond Daemon classification, beyond Xeno's doctrine. This was something else, something that fought like a warlord, not a monster. She issued new orders. Containment was no longer the goal. Understanding had failed. Elimination would follow, regardless of cost. Vader felt the shift immediately. The pressure sharpened, Imperial resolve hardening into inevitability. He welcomed it. These warriors had challenged him, forced adaptation, proven worthy opponents. That meant the Imperium would escalate further. Larger forces, heavier weapons. That suited him perfectly. Empires revealed their weaknesses when pressed. He turned from the battlefield and continued deeper into the city, leaving the fallen Astartes behind as a message written in ceramite and blood. Above, the warp churned uneasily. It had watched the battle with interest, noting how faith clashed against disciplined will. It did not intervene. Not yet. The gods observed, learning, adjusting. Vader had fought chaos and the Imperium in equal measure now. Both had failed to define him. That unsettled the balance more than any victory ever could. As he moved, Vader felt his connection stabilize again, adaptation accelerating under pressure. He understood this universe a little better now. Faith could wound him, discipline could slow him, but neither could command him. That truth anchored him more firmly than any creed. He walked on, cloak trailing through ash, already anticipating the next confrontation. The Imperium would not stop, nor would chaos. That was acceptable. Endless war was simply a system awaiting optimization. Darth Vader intended to provide it. Pain had always been Darth Vader's constant, but in this galaxy it learned new languages. As he moved beyond the ruined city and into the blasted wastes beyond, the warp pressed closer again, no longer striking openly, but bleeding into perception in subtler ways. His armor registered no new damage, yet his systems labored under accumulated strain. Each step felt heavier, not physically, but metaphysically, as if reality itself resisted his passage. The Force still answered, but sluggishly, tangled with psychic interference that grew thicker the longer he remained exposed. Vader recognized the pattern with cold clarity. Prolonged presence in this universe extracted a cost, not immediately fatal, not crippling, but corrosive, if ignored. He did not ignore it. He adapted. He halted atop a ridge overlooking miles of ash plains, once fertile land now rendered lifeless by bombardment and corruption. He knelt, entering deep meditation, forcing stillness upon his thoughts while the warp whispered at the edges of awareness. Rage surged easily here, amplified by the Immaterium's nature. It tempted him to draw deeper, to let emotion fuel power more freely. That path was efficient but dangerous. Vader understood that instinctively. Rage without control led to erosion of will, and will was the only true defense against this universe's predatory psychic ecosystem. He tightened his mental grip, compressing anger into a contained core rather than allowing it to radiate outward. The effort cost him focus, sweat forming beneath armor never meant for this environment. He endured. Endurance was familiar. The warp responded by changing tactics. Instead of pressure, it offered resonance. Vader felt moments where the Force surged more cleanly, power flowing with frightening ease. Each surge carried subtle distortion, a suggestion that surrendering precision would yield dominance. He rejected it every time. Discipline mattered more than raw output. Even so, the repeated strain took its toll. Microfractures formed in concentration, pain spiked unexpectedly, feedback rattling his cybernetics. For the first time since arriving, Vader acknowledged a limit, not defeat, a threshold. He could push beyond it, but doing so repeatedly would weaken him long term. He adjusted strategy accordingly. He moved more slowly now, conserving energy, relying on intimidation and positioning rather than constant exertion. When warp entities manifested at a distance, he ignored them, refusing engagement unless necessary. They tested him cautiously, skirting his path like predators unsure of prey. The Immaterium had learned restraint, but it had not ceased probing. Each probe strained his focus incrementally. Vader cataloged the sensation with clinical detachment. This universe punished prolonged dominance without adaptation. He would not repeat the mistake of assuming absolute superiority without accounting for environment. That lesson had cost him once before, long ago, beneath a burning sky. Elsewhere, chaos took note. The gods felt fluctuations in his presence, moments where his psychic imprint wavered slightly. Hope flickered. Not hope for victory, but opportunity. Corruption thrived in moments of strain. The ruinous powers whispered more carefully now, threading offers into the background noise rather than forcing them forward. Vader sensed the attempt and shut it out with contempt. He did not require external reinforcement. Pain was not weakness. Pain was structure. Still, the cumulative effect of warp exposure gnawed at his edges, forcing constant vigilance. That vigilance itself became a burden. Imperial forces tracked his movement from afar, noting reduced velocity and fewer overt displays of power. Analysts misinterpreted the data eagerly. Weakening confirmed. Attrition viable. The Inquisitor authorized continued pressure, ordering smaller engagements designed to exhaust rather than overwhelm. Vader felt the approach of patrols long before they saw him. He avoided unnecessary confrontation, slipping through terrain with calculated efficiency, forcing Imperials to react rather than engage. This frustrated them. Frustration bred mistakes. He exploited those when necessary, striking swiftly and vanishing before reinforcement arrived. Each encounter was brief, decisive, and taxing. The balance grew precarious. During one such skirmish, a sanctioned psyker attempted a direct mental assault, channeling Imperial faith into a focused lance of psychic force. Vader countered reflexively, crushing the psyker's mind instantly. But the effort sent a spike of feedback through his system. He staggered, catching himself on one knee. Pain flared brighter than it had since Mustafar. For a heartbeat, his control wavered. The warp surged eagerly. Vader roared, a raw, mechanical sound, and forced the surge back down through sheer will. He rose again, fury compressed into lethal calm. The Imperials fled. Vader remained standing, but the warning was clear. Even victory carried cost now. He retreated temporarily into a canyon carved by ancient bombardment, its walls lined with fused stone and dead machines. There, shielded partially from warp turbulence, he entered deep meditation again, pushing his limits carefully. He reinforced his mental architecture, restructuring how he interfaced with the Force in this environment. Instead of broad influence, he focused on efficiency, precision, minimal waste. The Force responded slowly, then more smoothly. Adaptation continued, but it was not instant. The warp resisted being excluded. It pressed in whenever his focus slipped. He corrected relentlessly. As hours passed, Vader became acutely aware of something he had not faced in years: the possibility of erosion. Not defeat, but gradual loss of edge if he allowed himself to fight endlessly without recalibration. That realization did not frighten him. It informed him. He adjusted long-term projections. He would need allies of convenience, or at least breathing space, to consolidate mastery. Endless confrontation without consolidation was inefficient. This galaxy thrived on attrition. He would not let it grind him down through sheer scale. Control required pacing as much as dominance. The warp sensed this shift and grew cautious again. It had nearly found a fracture. Nearly. That failure angered it. Gods whispered of patience, of long games. Vader mirrored that sentiment unknowingly. He emerged from the canyon renewed, but not restored fully, aware now of his limits and how to push them without breaking. Pain remained constant, but manageable. He accepted it as the cost of operating in a hostile reality. As he moved on, distant stars flickered erratically, warp storms forming and dissolving unpredictably. Vader felt himself becoming a fixed point around which instability bent. That realization anchored him further. He was not weakening. He was stabilizing through adaptation. The Imperium's pressure would increase. Chaos would continue probing. Both believed time favored them. Vader knew better. Time favored those who learned fastest, and he was still learning. The Eldar did not arrive with thunder or proclamation. They never did. Where the Imperium announced itself through fire and chaos through madness, the Eldar slipped into reality like a remembered dream. Darth Vader sensed them before he saw them, a presence sharp and ancient, minds disciplined into lethal elegance. It was not the warp's brutish pressure, nor Imperial faith's grinding weight. This was something colder, more precise, carrying sorrow like a blade honed over millennia. Vader paused as the air around him shifted, colors dulling, sound thinning. He turned slowly, already calculating trajectories, already prepared to strike. They emerged from nothing. Tall, slender figures in rune-etched armor, weapons humming with restrained power. At their center stood a robed seer, helm removed, revealing eyes that glimmered with reflected futures. The Eldar did not raise weapons. They observed. Vader felt their attention like a scalpel against his mind, probing with frightening clarity. He responded instinctively, hardening his mental defenses. The seer smiled faintly, as if amused by the resistance. "You walk loudly through fate," the Eldar said, voice calm, resonant. "The galaxy bends around you, and that is unwise." Vader said nothing. Silence was leverage. The Eldar stepped closer, staff tapping softly against the ground. "We have watched you reject the gods of this place." The seer continued. "You deny them worship, deny them claim. That is rare. That is dangerous." Vader's hand twitched, fingers curling slightly. "I do not deny," he replied. "I dominate." The Eldar's smile faded. "That is the same path," the seer said quietly. "Different language, same end." Images flooded Vader's mind without permission, futures branching and collapsing, worlds burning beneath banners he did not recognize, himself crowned in warp fire, transformed into something vast and monstrous. He snarled and forced the visions back, sheer will slamming psychic doors shut. The Eldar staggered slightly, surprised. "You stand at a fulcrum," the seer said, regaining composure. "If you continue as you are, the warp will adapt. It always does. It will either consume you or remake you into a god you despise." Vader stepped forward, towering over the Eldar. "I will not become what I destroy." The Eldar did not retreat. "So said many before you," the seer replied. "They all failed. Not through weakness, but inevitability." Vader felt anger surge, hot and sharp, the warp stirring eagerly at its edges. He crushed it down instantly. "I am not them," he said. "I am not of this galaxy." The seer nodded slowly. "That is why you are more dangerous than you understand. You do not belong to the patterns here, yet you tear through them regardless. That creates ripples we cannot fully see." The Eldar gestured, and the world around them shimmered. For a heartbeat, Vader glimpsed a distant golden throne, a skeletal figure bound in light and suffering, worshipped as a god against its will. He recoiled internally, recognizing something he hated instantly. A tyrant elevated by faith, trapped by belief, sustained by endless sacrifice. The seer watched his reaction closely. "You see him," the Eldar said softly. You will meet him one way or another, and when you do, the choice before you will define this galaxy's future. Vader's breathing deepened, mechanical and controlled. I do not bow, he said, not to gods, not to corpses. The Eldar inclined their head. Nor does he, the seer replied. Yet, look at what belief has done to him. Silence stretched between them, heavy with implication. Vader felt a tremor of something unfamiliar. Not doubt, recognition. He crushed it immediately, but the echo lingered. You are approaching a threshold, the Eldar continued. Already the warp tests you differently. Already your power strains under its laws. You can continue forward and force the galaxy to adapt, or you can choose a narrower path. Vader's gaze hardened. You offer warning, he said. Why? The seer's eyes darkened. Because if you ascend, they replied, the Eldar will not survive the aftermath, nor eventually will humanity. Order imposed through fear inevitably calcifies into tyranny. Tyranny feeds the warp as surely as worship does. Vader laughed, a harsh rasp. Fear is efficient, he said. This galaxy thrives on it already. The Eldar shook their head. Unfocused fear, yes, but what you bring is different. You refine it. You concentrate it. That creates singularities. The seer stepped back, staff glowing faintly. We will not oppose you now. That would be wasteful. But we will not aid you either. Know this, outsider. The more control you exert, the closer you come to apotheosis, whether you desire it or not. Vader reached out with the Force, testing the Eldar's defenses. They were formidable, layered with psychic discipline and ancient craft. He could break them, but it would cost him more than the gain justified. He withdrew deliberately. The Eldar observed the choice with interest. You are learning, the seer said. That alone makes you dangerous. With a final gesture, reality folded around them, and the Eldar vanished, leaving only silence and the faint scent of ozone. Vader stood alone again, the encounter echoing through his mind. The visions lingered, unwelcome but persistent. Apotheosis, godhood, chains disguised as crowns. He rejected the concept utterly, yet the warning gnawed at him. The warp adapted, belief shaped reality. Control imposed long enough became something else. He clenched his fist, armor creaking softly. He would not be trapped by destiny. Destiny was another form of faith. As he resumed his march, Vader adjusted his strategy subtly. Fewer displays of overwhelming power. More surgical application. Fear, but directed. Order, but flexible. He would not give the warp a singular image to crystallize around. He would remain undefined, fluid, impossible to canonize. The Eldar's warning had not changed his goal, but it had refined his method. That made it valuable. Far away, Eldar seers convened, futures shifting wildly around a single black armored silhouette. Some paths led to extinction, others to stagnation, a few to something stranger still. They marked the anomaly and watched. Meanwhile, chaos reevaluated again, sensing restraint where rage had once flared freely. The Imperium, ignorant of the encounter, continued tightening its net, unaware that their quarry had just been warned about the cost of victory. Vader felt the galaxy leaning toward a breaking point. The pressure mounted, but his resolve hardened in response. He would not ascend. He would not kneel. He would walk the knife edge between domination and damnation and force the universe to accommodate him. That was his choice. And for the first time since arriving in this cursed millennium, he understood fully what was at stake. The decision was not unanimous, but it was inevitable. Within the sealed strategium of the inquisitorial vessel, robed figures argued beneath flickering lumen globes and whispering prayer engines. Data slates projected fragmented images of Darth Vader's advance. Space Marines slain, warp manifestations disrupted, Eldar interference confirmed. Each revelation narrowed the range of acceptable responses. Observation had failed. Containment was unrealistic. Understanding was irrelevant. The Imperium did not survive by tolerating anomalies that challenged its metaphysical authority. The Inquisitor presiding over the council listened in silence, hands folded, eyes hollow with resolve. When she finally spoke, the chamber fell quiet instantly. Authorize exterminatus grade response parameters, she said. Localized, conditional, immediate. The words carried weight older than worlds. Several acolytes hesitated, then nodded grimly. The order propagated outward through encrypted channels, activating dormant protocols and redirecting assets. Naval battle groups altered course. Titan legions received priority alerts. The planet's fate was sealed, contingent only on whether the anomaly could be eliminated before escalation reached its final stage. For the Imperium, annihilation was preferable to uncertainty. Faith demanded it. Darth Vader felt the shift long before the first strike craft broke atmosphere. The scrutiny hardened into intent, sharp and focused, like a blade drawn across his awareness. He paused amid the ruins of an abandoned refinery complex, the air heavy with promethium residue and ozone. The warp stirred uneasily, sensing mass violence approaching. Vader inhaled slowly, measured, and adjusted his stance. This was no longer probing pressure or surgical engagement. This was extermination doctrine. The Imperium had decided he could not be allowed to exist. He welcomed the clarity. Thunder rolled across the sky as Imperial gunships descended, engines screaming, hulls bristling with weapons. Valkyries deployed kill teams in rapid succession, stormtroopers fanning out with practiced precision. Artillery began falling moments later, the ground erupting in controlled patterns designed to deny movement. Vader moved immediately, force pushing his body into motion as explosions chased his path. Shrapnel tore through the air. He raised a barrier, imperfect but sufficient, and advanced directly into the storm. Fear rippled through the Imperial ranks as Auspec's readings spiked and failed simultaneously. He was not retreating. He was advancing. The first Titan announced itself with seismic force, a god machine emerging from the haze, its void shields humming with contained annihilation. Its weapons tracked Vader automatically, machine spirit screaming threat confirmation. The Inquisitor watched from orbit, jaw clenched. This was escalation beyond subtlety. If this failed, nothing short of planetary death would suffice. The Titan fired. A beam of energy carved a molten trench across the landscape, engulfing Vader's position. When the smoke cleared, he still stood, armor scorched, systems screaming, but intact. He raised his hand and tore a section of collapsed refinery into the Titan's knee joint. The impact staggered the machine, alarms blaring. The crew screamed prayers as their god stumbled. Imperial forces surged, bolter, fire, and lost barrages, saturating the area. Vader moved through it like a singularity, crushing squads with telekinetic force, severing vehicles in half with precise strikes. The warp howled, feeding on the carnage, trying again to amplify his rage. He denied it, focusing instead on efficiency. Each kill was deliberate, each movement calculated. Pain flared brighter than ever, feedback rattling his systems. But he endured. He had endured worse. The Titan recovered and fired again, void shields flaring. Vader felt the impact drive him to one knee, armor integrity dropping dangerously. He snarled and pushed back, channeling the force in a focused lance that pierced the weakened joint. The Titan collapsed, its death scream echoing across the battlefield as its reactor went critical. Vader turned away as it detonated, shockwave rolling over him, hurling debris and bodies alike. When the dust settled, the battlefield was silent save for burning wreckage and distant screams. From orbit, the Inquisitor stared at the aftermath in disbelief. A Titan had fallen. Casualties exceeded projections catastrophically. This was no longer a question of cost. It was a question of survival. She clenched her fist and issued the final authorization. "Prepare full planetary sterilization," she said. "If he cannot be killed, the world will die with him." Vader felt the order the moment it was given. The warp reacted violently, reality shuddering as orbital weapons aligned. He rose slowly, armor damaged, power reserves critically low, but will unbroken. Exterminatus. He understood the concept instantly. Total annihilation to preserve ideological purity. It disgusted him. It also clarified everything. The Imperium was no different from the Sith or from the gods of chaos. Power enforced through annihilation when control failed. He would not allow it. He reached outward, pushing beyond previous thresholds, not in rage, but necessity. The force responded unevenly, strained but present. He began moving toward the planetary shield generators, ignoring Imperial fire that followed him desperately. Time compressed into action. He crushed defenses, tore through bastions, severed control nodes with brutal efficiency. Each step cost him pain mounting, systems faltering. He did not stop. In orbit, weapons charged. The countdown began. Vader reached the final generator and drove his saber into its core, overloading it catastrophically. Energy surged skyward, disrupting targeting arrays and void alignments. The first orbital strike misfired, scorching empty land instead of the planet's heart. The Inquisitor slammed her fist against the console, fury and awe warring within her. He had delayed the end, not prevented it. Vader collapsed to one knee amid the smoking ruins, breathing ragged. He had bought time, nothing more. But time mattered. The galaxy had drawn its line. He had crossed it. As Imperial forces regrouped and chaos watched eagerly from the warp, Darth Vader forced himself upright once more. He was wounded. He was strained, but he was not finished. The Imperium had chosen annihilation. He would answer with defiance. The Necrons did not intervene out of mercy. They intervened because calculation demanded it. Long before the Imperium authorized planetary sterilization, tomb complexes beneath the planet's crust had begun to stir. Ancient sensors, dormant for millennia, registered anomalies that defied known parameters. Warp fluctuation without daemonic signature. Psychic dominance without faith. A singular will exerting force upon reality itself. To the Necrons, this was not heresy or blasphemy. It was inefficiency intruding upon a carefully ordered galaxy, and inefficiency was unacceptable. As Darth Vader forced himself upright amid the shattered generator complex, the ground beneath him vibrated differently than before, not from bombardment or warp turbulence, but from mechanical precision. The earth split open in geometric patterns, slabs of rock folding away like doors. Green light spilled upward, cold and sterile. From the depths rose Necron warriors, their metal forms unmarred by time, Gauss weapons humming softly. At their center floated an overlord, tall and imposing, eyes burning with emerald fire. Vader turned slowly, senses flaring. This presence was unlike anything he had encountered yet. No warp echo, no emotional resonance, only absolute ancient order. The overlord spoke, its voice a metallic resonance, transmitted directly into Vader's mind. "You disrupt probability fields," it said. "You attract extermination protocols. This planet's destruction would interfere with our reclamation cycle." Vader straightened, pain screaming through his systems. "Then you should eliminate them," he replied. The Necron regarded him silently. "Your continued existence presents unacceptable variables," it said. "However, your actions have destabilized multiple hostile forces. A temporary alignment is statistically optimal." Imperial forces regrouping nearby froze as Necron fire erupted without warning. Gauss beams flayed tanks and infantry alike, stripping matter down to constituent atoms. The battlefield shifted instantly. Imperial Vox channels erupted in panic as a new enemy entered the equation. Vader watched the devastation with detached interest. The Necrons fought with brutal efficiency, no wasted motion, no emotional expenditure. He recognized the philosophy immediately: control without passion, order without belief. It resonated more than he expected. Orbital augurs detected the Necron emergence and flagged priority alerts. The Inquisitor's expression hardened. Necrons changed everything. Exterminatus protocols paused automatically as higher authorities demanded reassessment. Planetary destruction risked awakening deeper tombs. The countdown stalled. Vader felt the pressure ease marginally. The Necrons had bought time, whether intentionally or not. He turned back to the Overlord. "You interfere to preserve assets," he said. "Not to save lives." "Correct," the Overlord replied. "Organic survival is irrelevant." Vader inclined his head slightly. "Acceptable." Chaos reacted with fury. The warp surged violently as the Necron's presence suppressed psychic currents, dampening demonic manifestation. Gods howled in outrage as ancient technology denied them sustenance. Vader felt the Immaterium recoil, its pressure lessening temporarily. The reprieve was welcome. He moved alongside the Necron advance, not as ally, but parallel force. Where Necron fire flayed matter, Vader struck surgically, eliminating command units and artillery emplacements. Their methods complemented each other unintentionally. Order met order, not in harmony, but in efficiency. The Overlord observed Vader closely, cataloging data. "You are not warp-based," it noted. yet you exert influence upon it. I dominate it, Vader replied. I do not belong to it. The Overlord paused, processors whirring. Interesting, it said. You resemble pre-biotransference Necron tier warlords in methodology. Vader ignored the implication. History held no authority over him here. Imperial forces attempted to adapt, redirecting fire, coordinating countermeasures, but confusion reigned. Space Marines redeployed to contain the Necron threat, drawing pressure away from Vader. He exploited the opening mercilessly, striking supply lines and command nodes with renewed precision. Though weakened, he moved with purpose, conserving energy, letting Necron fire do the heavy lifting. This was not alliance. It was convergence of interest. He would not rely on it for long. As the battle raged, the Overlord drifted closer. Your presence attracts large-scale retaliation, it said. Continued proximity increases risk. Vader met its gaze. Then distance yourself, he replied. I will not. The Overlord considered this. Statistical models indicate your survival probability decreases without support. Vader's response was immediate. Then your models are incomplete. The Necron made no further comment. Above, Imperial command fractured. Necron involvement elevated the conflict beyond inquisitorial authority. Segmentum-level commands intervened, delaying extermination further. Time stretched. Vader felt his strength stabilizing slightly under reduced warp pressure. Not recovery, but equilibrium. Enough. He turned away from the main battle, using the chaos as cover to withdraw strategically. The Overlord watched him depart but did not pursue. The temporary alignment had served its purpose. As Vader moved into the wastelands beyond, he sensed the Necrons withdrawing methodically, sealing tomb entrances, reclaiming territory. Chaos howled impotently. The Imperium raged and recalculated. The galaxy churned under conflicting priorities. Vader allowed himself a moment of reflection as he walked. He had not chosen this alignment, but he had used it. That mattered. Pragmatism over purity. Control over pride. The Eldar's warning echoed faintly. Narrow paths preserved agency. Behind him, the planet survived, for now. Ahead lay deeper conflict. The Necrons had shown him something valuable. Order could exist without faith, without emotion, without gods. That truth strengthened his resolve. He would not ascend. He would not kneel. He would impose structure where madness reigned, even if that meant standing between empires and ancient machines alike. The temporary reprieve ended as he crossed into the shadow of a dead mountain range. Imperial pursuit resumed cautiously. Chaos whispers returned, subdued but persistent. Vader pressed on, battered but unbroken. The galaxy had tried annihilation. It had failed. It would try something else next. He would be ready. The first dream was not his. Darth Vader did not sleep, not truly. Yet as he crossed the dead mountain range, consciousness slipped into something adjacent. A forced intrusion carried on a psychic frequency older than the Imperium itself. The warp did not deliver it. Faith did. A presence pressed against his awareness. Vast, restrained, agonizingly focused. For the first time since arriving in this galaxy, Vader did not feel hunted or tested. He felt observed. The sensation was not hostile. It was heavy, suffocating, like standing beneath a collapsed sky. He stopped walking. The world dimmed around him. He stood in a vast hall of impossible scale. Golden pillars rose into darkness, their surfaces etched with 10,000 years of devotion and decay. At the hall's center sat a figure upon a throne of mechanisms and light. Skeletal yet immense, radiating power that made the warp recoil instinctively. Darth Vader understood instantly what he was seeing. Not a god in the way chaos defined it. A tyrant elevated by belief, sustained by sacrifice, imprisoned by worship. The God Emperor of mankind regarded him without eyes, and the weight of that regard was almost unbearable. You are not of this reality. The presence pressed into Vader's mind. Words formed without sound. Vader answered with effort. Will braced against pressure that dwarfed any he had faced. Neither are you, he replied. The presence flinched almost imperceptibly. Around them, visions flickered. Crusades, betrayals, burning worlds, endless war justified by necessity. Vader saw reflections of his own past threaded through humanity's history. Ambition calcified into dogma, control mistaken for salvation. Rage stirred, dangerous and sharp. He forced it down. You enforce order through fear, the Emperor's presence continued. It was not accusation, it was recognition. Vader stepped forward, cloak trailing across marble that felt warm beneath his boots. Order is efficient, he said. This galaxy rots because it worships chaos and calls it faith. A pause, a psychic pressure like a sigh. Once, the Emperor replied, I believed the same. The words carried regret so vast it bent the hall around them. Vader felt it strike something deep, an echo of Mustafar, of promises broken in pursuit of control. He crushed the sensation instantly. Regret was weakness. You are trapped, Vader said. Not as a taunt, as an observation, sustained by belief you despise. The Emperor's presence tightened, and you are not, it replied. Yet, the word echoed, heavy with inevitability. Around them, futures flared and collapsed. Vader saw himself crowned in iron and fire, worshipped despite refusal, elevated by fear alone. He recoiled internally, slamming psychic barriers into place. I will not become you, he said. The Emperor's presence softened fractionally. Nor did I intend to become this, it answered. The hall trembled. Faith surged from a million worlds, pressing against Vader like a tidal wave. He felt it scrape across his armor, his mind, trying to define him, to slot him into existing mythology. He pushed back, pouring will into negation, refusing classification. The effort was immense. Pain flared brighter than it had since his arrival. Systems screaming, breath ragged. The Emperor's presence pressed closer, not attacking, but anchoring. You stand at a crossroads, it said. One path leads to dominion so absolute it destroys you. The other leads to annihilation by those who fear what they cannot command. Vader laughed bitterly. Those paths are familiar, he said. I have walked them before. The Emperor's presence dimmed slightly. And what did you choose then? Vader did not answer. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken truth. The Emperor did not press further. Instead, it withdrew slightly, as if conceding space. You seek control without worship, it said. That may be the only path this galaxy has not yet tested. But understand this, belief will find you regardless. Fear is a form of prayer here. The hall began to fracture, light bleeding into darkness. The vision destabilized. Before it collapsed entirely, the Emperor's presence spoke one final thought, quieter, almost weary. If you truly refuse godhood, you must limit yourself. Absolute dominance creates myths. Myths create chains. The vision shattered. Vader staggered as reality snapped back into place, dropping him to one knee among blackstone and ash. His system screamed warnings, power levels dipping dangerously low. He breathed heavily, forcing control back into place. The encounter had cost him more than any battle so far. Not physically, philosophically. He remained still for a long moment, processing the implications. The Emperor was not his enemy, not yet, but they were reflections, shaped by different galaxies, walking parallel paths toward similar prisons. Imperial psychers across the segmentum screamed as feedback ripped through the Astronomicon briefly, a distortion like a skipped heartbeat. The Emperor's throne flared, then stabilized. No alarms sounded publicly. The Imperium did not know what had occurred. Chaos felt it too, recoiling as something vast shifted alignment subtly. The gods whispered urgently, reassessing. Something had passed between tyrants. Vader rose slowly, armor locking into place. He felt changed, not weakened, but constrained by understanding. He would not allow himself to become a fixed point of worship. He would not centralize fear around his identity alone. Control would be exercised indirectly, through systems, through enforced order that did not require his presence as an icon. The realization was cold and sharp. The Emperor had survived 10,000 years by becoming indispensable. Vader would survive by remaining unnecessary. He resumed walking, each step deliberate. Imperial pursuit closed in again, but he did not rush. He would let the galaxy chase shadows while he dismantled foundations. Chaos would escalate. The Imperium would harden. Both believed themselves inevitable. Vader now knew inevitability was a trap. He would remain in motion, undefined, uncanonized. That was the only way to win. Behind him, unseen, the Emperor watched the future adjust slightly, a narrow path opening where none had existed before. Ahead, the galaxy prepared for the next collision, unaware that its newest threat had just rejected the most dangerous victory imaginable. Chaos did not tolerate ambiguity for long. The ruinous powers had watched Darth Vader survive demonic assault, imperial annihilation, and even the gaze of the corpse emperor himself. That alone elevated him beyond anomaly. He had become a problem of theology, a being who rejected worship yet generated fear on a scale that fed the warp regardless, a will strong enough to wound expectation itself. For Chaos, this was unacceptable. Refusal was one thing, independence was another. The gods reached consensus rarely, but when they did, reality trembled. Vader would either ascend or be erased. There would be no third option. The warp storm formed without warning. Not a gradual distortion, but an immediate, catastrophic convergence. The sky tore open above the dead mountain range, revealing a vortex of color and screaming geometry that drowned out stars. Gravity twisted, time stuttered. Demonic legions poured forth in numbers that dwarfed previous assaults. Banners of blood, rot, excess, and change woven together in obscene unity. This was not temptation. This was enforcement. Vader felt the immaterium slam into him like a tidal wave, pressure beyond anything he had endured so far. His armor system shrieked, his vision blurred. The Force buckled, strained by warp saturation so intense it threatened to drown distinction entirely. He planted his feet and endured. Voices layered over one another, no longer subtle. Kneel, ascend, be crowned, be eternal, be free. Rage surged violently, amplified beyond restraint. The warp clawed at his pain, magnifying it, offering release through surrender. For the first time since arriving, Vader wavered, not in loyalty, but endurance. His systems flashed critical warnings. Power reserves dipped dangerously low. The pressure threatened to crush him physically and mentally. He understood the truth instantly. Chaos was not trying to defeat him. It was trying to make him inevitable. A colossal form emerged from the storm, a composite of demonic archetypes, bearing the marks of all four gods. It spoke with a voice that bent reality around it. "You cannot exist without feeding us," it proclaimed. "Fear is worship. Control is devotion. Accept what you are." Vader raised his head slowly, breath ragged, pain flaring white hot. "I choose what I am," he replied. The daemon laughed, sound shattering stone. "You already have," it said. The storm intensified. Reality began to collapse inward, a pocket apocalypse forming around Vader. He felt the warp attempting to crystallize his identity, to lock him into myth through overwhelming narrative force. This was the final trap. Apotheosis, not through agreement, but inevitability. Vader understood now what the Eldar and the Emperor had warned him about. Absolute dominance created singularities. He could push harder, unleash everything, tear through the storm, and emerge crowned in fire. He could win, and in winning, he would lose everything that mattered. He made a different choice. Vader did not surge forward. He withdrew, not retreat, but internal contraction. He pulled his presence inward violently, severing his psychic imprint from the surrounding warp as much as possible. He shut down external projection, abandoning dominance for containment. The effort was excruciating. Pain spiked beyond tolerance as systems overloaded. He screamed, a raw, mechanical sound torn from his lungs as he crushed his own rage back into a controlled core. The warp screamed in response, furious, confused. This was not how champions behaved. The daemon lunged, enraged. Vader did not meet it head on. He stepped aside, letting its mass pass, and struck surgically, not with power, but precision. He targeted the summoning anchors, the metaphysical joints holding the storm together. Each strike was costly, draining him further, but the effect was immediate. The storm destabilized, its coherence unraveling. Chaos howled as the narrative fractured. This was not victory through domination. This was sabotage. The warp recoiled violently, lashing out in desperation. A blast of raw energy slammed into Vader, hurling him across the shattered ground. His armor cracked. Systems failed. He lay motionless for a heartbeat that stretched impossibly long. The daemon loomed over him, furious, "You deny eternity," it roared. Vader forced himself upright, every movement agony. "I deny you," he rasped. With the last of his strength, he drove his saber into the storm's core, not to destroy it, but to disrupt it long enough to collapse inward. The warp imploded. Daemons were ripped back screaming. The storm collapsed into itself, sealing the tear with a thunderous concussion that flattened the surrounding terrain. Silence followed, abrupt and unnatural. Vader collapsed to one knee, then to both, breath ragged, systems flickering between failure and survival. He had done it, not by winning, but by refusing the terms of the conflict entirely. Chaos had been denied a champion. That denial echoed through the immaterium like a wound. Far away, the ruinous powers recoiled, enraged beyond measure. They had not lost, but they had failed to claim him. That failure mattered. It would not be forgotten. The galaxy shuddered as warp currents realigned, storms dissipating unexpectedly, demonic incursions faltering briefly. The Imperium felt the shift without understanding it. Eldar seers gasped as futures rewrote themselves violently. The Necrons observed coldly, registering reduced warp volatility. Vader remained kneeling amid the devastation, barely conscious, yet alive. He had pushed himself to the edge and stepped back deliberately. The cost was immense. He would not recover quickly. But he had preserved something far more valuable than power: agency. The warp had tried to force him into myth. He had shattered the mold instead. As he struggled to his feet, battered and diminished but unbroken, Vader understood the truth of his path fully now. He would never defeat chaos by overpowering it. He would defeat it by denying it symbols, champions, and inevitability. He would remain a moving shadow, a pressure without a face, a tyrant without a throne. That was how he would survive this galaxy, and that was why chaos would never stop hunting him. Recovery was slow, deliberate, and solitary. Darth Vader moved through the shattered remains of the mountain range like a ghost forged of iron, every step measured to conserve failing reserves. His armor had sealed itself into emergency configurations, routing power inefficiently but reliably enough to sustain life. Pain saturated every system, not sharp now but grinding, omnipresent, a reminder of the cost he had paid to deny chaos its prize. The warp remained distant, cautious, as if unsure how to engage a being that had refused both surrender and triumph. That distance was fragile. Vader knew it would not last. Imperial forces did not pursue immediately. Auspec's readings were contradictory, psychic noise unstable after the collapse of the storm. Command hesitated, debating whether the anomaly had finally destroyed itself. Chaos cult activity spiked and then fell erratically, confusing predictive models. For a brief, rare interval, the galaxy paused. Vader used that pause to think, not tactically, but philosophically. The Emperor's warning echoed, the Eldar's prophecy lingered. Absolute control invited apotheosis. Refusal invited annihilation. There was, however, a third path, narrow and dangerous, but viable. He would exercise will without centralizing it. He reached a derelict void port carved into the mountainside. Its landing pads cracked, its towers collapsed. Here, centuries of war had left nothing but rusted hulls and dead servitors. Vader sealed the entrances and settled into deep meditation, forcing his battered systems into alignment with his will. He reviewed everything he had learned since arrival. The warp fed on symbolism. The Imperium fed on hierarchy. Chaos fed on champions. If he became a singular icon, both would eventually crystallize around him. He would not allow that. His influence would be distributed, indirect, systemic. Fear would be weaponized impersonally. Control would be enforced through mechanisms rather than myth. This realization demanded sacrifice. Vader understood it immediately. To remain undefined, he would need to limit direct intervention. Fewer displays of overwhelming power. Fewer moments that allowed stories to grow around his image. He would need intermediaries, autonomous enforcers who carried his will without invoking worship. The idea was distasteful. He trusted no one. Yet efficiency demanded delegation. The Sith had failed because they centralized power too tightly. The Emperor of this galaxy had failed the same way. Vader would not repeat that error. As he meditated, he felt distant minds stirring, not imperial or chaotic, but fractured, opportunistic, rogue traders, renegade commanders, disillusioned Imperial elements operating at the margins. They sensed a shift, an opening. Vader did not reach out to them directly. He seeded influence subtly, manipulating events from a distance, engineering situations where his philosophy produced results without his presence. Supply lines collapsed mysteriously. Chaos cults imploded under internal purges, driven by fear of an unseen arbiter. Imperial commanders made decisions more cautiously, haunted by rumors of retribution that did not require his appearance. The system began to work. Chaos noticed first. The gods felt fear without a focal point, violence without a champion to claim. This unsettled them profoundly. Worship spiked and faltered unpredictably, destabilizing rituals. Demonic manifestations weakened in regions touched by Vader's indirect pressure. The warp adapted sluggishly, unused to threats without mythic shape. The Imperium noticed next, interpreting the phenomenon as a spreading heretical doctrine rather than a single entity. Inquisitors argued over classifications that never resolved. That confusion was valuable. Vader remained absent, conserving strength, reinforcing the pattern. Eventually, he rose from meditation. Systems stabilized enough for movement. He did not feel stronger. He felt restrained, deliberately so. This was the cost of survival without godhood. He departed the void port quietly, leaving no spectacle, no survivors to mythologize his presence. Imperial patrols passed nearby without detecting him. Chaos cults sensed only pressure, not identity. Vader moved like an algorithm, not a legend. As he traveled, he felt the Force respond differently. Weaker in raw output, but cleaner, less entangled with warp turbulence. This was the trade. Less dominance, more stability. He accepted it without regret. Power that demanded worship was a trap. Power that functioned quietly endured. The galaxy shifted subtly under his influence, not bending, but aligning. Far away, Eldar seers observed futures narrowing again, but this time not toward apotheosis or extinction. A third path stabilized faintly, fragile but persistent. They did not intervene. The Necrons registered reduced warp volatility and adjusted reclamation timelines. The Imperium tightened control measures, never realizing they were responding to a pressure that did not seek their destruction, only their predictability. Chaos seethed, frustrated by an enemy that denied narrative satisfaction entirely. Vader paused at the edge of a ruined highway, watching distant fires burn. He did not feel triumphant. He felt resolved. This was not conquest. This was containment of chaos through structure. He would remain in motion, shifting influence, never allowing belief to crystallize around him. If that meant personal limitation, so be it. He had sacrificed more before. The choice was made. He turned and vanished into the wasteland, leaving behind a galaxy struggling to understand a threat that refused to behave like a god, a daemon, or a hero. That refusal was his greatest weapon. The galaxy did not burn all at once. It burned quietly. Darth Vader's choice to operate without spectacle reshaped war not through apocalypse, but through attrition refined into doctrine. Over months, measured in campaigns rather than days, sectors destabilized in unfamiliar ways. Chaos uprisings collapsed without daemonic climax. Imperial crackdowns intensified, but struck shadows instead of enemies. Supply chains failed, command hierarchies ossified under paranoia. Fear spread without a face to attach itself to, and that terrified the galaxy far more than any named horror ever had. Vader remained unseen, and therefore unavoidable. He moved constantly, never lingering long enough to become legend. When he struck, it was surgical. A rogue governor vanished, his palace found empty and silent, power structures collapsing overnight. A chaos warband imploded when its leaders were assassinated in perfect sequence, rituals failing because no one dared assume command afterward. Vader did not lead armies. He removed keystones. The result was the same as conquest, but without banners or worship. He felt the warp strain under the pattern, struggling to feed on fear that lacked devotional shape. The Immaterium adapted slowly, clumsily, unused to being denied catharsis. Imperial authorities responded with escalating brutality, believing terror required escalation. Entire populations were purged preemptively. Exterminatus was authorized more frequently, yet its psychological impact diminished. Worlds burned, but no victory followed. The absence of a central enemy eroded morale. Soldiers whispered of an arbiter who punished excess and weakness alike. Inquisitors hunted myths that never solidified. Vader observed this dispassionately. The Imperium was consuming itself to fight a shadow. That inefficiency pleased him. Chaos fared no better. Without a champion to elevate, cult activity fractured. Gods competed for scraps of worship, their infighting destabilizing coordinated assaults. Demonic incursions faltered unpredictably, not repelled by holy force, but by absence of narrative payoff. Vader sensed the frustration radiating through the warp, pressure building without release. He used it carefully, never pushing hard enough to provoke apotheosis. His restraint became habit, then doctrine. There were moments when restraint cost lives that spectacle might have saved. Vader acknowledged them without hesitation. Order demanded sacrifice. He did not delude himself otherwise. What mattered was scale and trajectory. The galaxy's wars slowed in some regions, intensified in others, but always along lines he influenced indirectly. He had become a constant, not a conqueror. Once, a Space Marine chapter came close to cornering him. Their tactics were flawless, their faith absolute. Vader disengaged rather than annihilate them, collapsing a bridge behind him and vanishing into void space. Let them live. Survival without victory bred caution. Caution bred delay. Delay created opportunity elsewhere. The warp tested him again in subtler ways, weaving rumors that elevated him into folk demon, then folk god. Vader countered by deliberately contradicting expectations, striking chaos one month, Imperials the next, then vanishing entirely. No pattern endured long enough to crystallize belief. It was exhausting. It was effective. Eldar seers watched the future stabilize into something grim but survivable. The Necrons expanded methodically, satisfied with reduced warp volatility. The Emperor on his throne endured, unchanged, yet faintly aware of a pressure that eased some storms without explanation. None understood the mechanism fully. That ignorance protected Vader better than any armor. He stood once on a barren moon, gazing at a distant system burning under Imperial sanction. He felt no triumph, only confirmation. This was the cost of his path. Quiet suffering instead of glorious annihilation. Control instead of victory. He turned away and left the system to its fate, already influencing another conflict light years away. The galaxy burned quietly, reshaped not by gods or heroes, but by a will that refused to become either. Darth Vader remained unseen, unclaimed, and therefore unstoppable. In time, the galaxy learned to adapt to Darth Vader's existence without ever truly understanding it. That, more than any single victory or defeat, defined the outcome of his arrival in the 41st Millennium. There was no final battle that marked the end of his war, no throne shattered, no god slain in a blaze of revelation. Instead, there was a slow recalibration of fear itself. Where once terror had names, icons, banners, and prayers, now it became procedural, impersonal, inevitable. Vader had not conquered the galaxy. He had altered its operating assumptions. Imperial command structures grew increasingly rigid as paranoia deepened. Worlds were fortified beyond necessity, resources hoarded, initiative punished. The Imperium's greatest strength, its absolute hierarchy, became a liability under constant, undefined pressure. Officers hesitated. Crusades stalled. Entire regiments waited for orders that never came, fearing that decisive action would draw the attention of something they could not see. Inquisitors purged each other over doctrinal disagreements, chasing rumors that contradicted themselves by design. Vader watched from the margins, ensuring no single authority grew confident enough to stabilize. Order imposed through stagnation was still order. Chaos suffered more profoundly. The warp thrived on narrative momentum. Champions rising, gods clashing, apocalyptic climaxes feeding endless cycles of belief. Vader denied it all. Cult leaders vanished mid-sermon. Daemon princes were banished without spectacle, their domains collapsing quietly. Worship fragmented, its energy dissipating before it could coalesce into meaningful power. The ruinous powers raged and schemed, but found no leverage point. Vader did not defy them openly anymore, he simply made their victories unsatisfying. Over time, that proved more damaging than outright resistance. Xenos factions adapted unevenly. The Eldar watched their dooms recede fractionally, future stabilizing into grim survivability rather than extinction. They did not intervene. Intervention risked definition. The Necrons expanded methodically, content with reduced warp volatility and the continued erosion of organic empires. To them, Vader was a transient variable, useful only insofar as he accelerated entropy among their rivals. They neither opposed nor aided him further. He was irrelevant to their eternity. Vader himself became something paradoxical, less powerful than he might have been, yet more effective than any god. He never recovered fully from his confrontation with chaos. He never sought to. His restraint was deliberate, permanent. The Force flowed through him more cleanly now, less violently, shaped by precision rather than rage. Pain remained constant, but he no longer sought to overcome it. He used it as an anchor, a reminder of the cost of excess. Apotheosis remained possible, always tempting, always near. He rejected it daily. There were moments when he could have ended wars outright, moments when a single display of overwhelming force would have shattered enemy coalitions and saved millions. He did not take them. Spectacle bred belief. Belief bred chains. Vader chose instead to let conflicts exhaust themselves, intervening only to prevent consolidation into something stable enough to worship. To many, this made him monstrous. To others, merciful. Vader did not care. Moral clarity had never been his concern. Control was. Imperial propaganda eventually gave him a name, then dozens. The Iron Warden, the Void Tyrant, the Uncrowned King. None endured. Each time a myth gained traction, Vader dismantled the conditions that supported it, striking in ways that contradicted expectation. He killed those who tried to worship him as readily as those who tried to kill him. The message spread without words. No one owned him, and no one benefited from claiming him. Centuries later, in records sealed and fragmented, historians would argue whether Darth Vader truly changed the course of the 41st Millennium or merely slowed its collapse. There was no consensus, only patterns. Warp storms that never quite reached critical mass, crusades that stalled inexplicably, chaos incursions that burned out instead of escalating, a galaxy still damned, still brutal, but marginally less absolute in its horrors. On a nameless world at the edge of Imperial space, Vader stood beneath a starless sky, watching fleets burn in the distance. He felt no satisfaction, only confirmation. This was the price of refusing godhood. Endless vigilance, endless motion, no legacy carved in stone, only pressure applied where it mattered most. He turned away and vanished once more, leaving behind nothing but consequences. The galaxy would never thank him. It would never understand him. That was acceptable. Darth Vader had not come to rule the 41st Millennium. He had come to ensure that no one ever ruled it absolutely again. Darth Vader's fall into the Warhammer 40,000 universe did not end in conquest, corruption, or coronation. It ended in something far more unsettling: equilibrium. By refusing godhood, rejecting worship, and denying chaos its most powerful currency myth, Vader carved a third path through a galaxy that understood only absolutes. He did not save the Imperium, nor did he destroy it. He did not banish chaos, nor did he serve it. Instead, he imposed limits on inevitability itself. In the 41st Millennium, belief shapes reality. Vader learned that truth quickly and chose to weaponize its absence. By remaining undefined, unseen, and uncelebrated, he ensured that fear never crystallized into devotion. His restraint prevented apotheosis, but it also prevented erasure. He became a constant pressure rather than a singular event, a force that destabilized empires without replacing them. The galaxy remained grim and dark, but no longer comfortably so. The Imperium tightened its grip and fractured under the strain. Chaos raged and starved simultaneously. Xenos endured, adapted, and waited. And through it all, Darth Vader walked on, an iron will refusing both salvation and damnation. His legacy was not victory, but denial, the refusal to let the universe decide what he must become. In a galaxy that only understands gods and monsters, Vader chose to remain neither. Whether that choice leads to eventual salvation or merely delays extinction is a question even the Emperor cannot answer. The Emperor protects. More stories await.